It was a cold, wet evening in Seattle, the kind that made everything feel a little heavier and lonelier. The streets glistened under the rain, and the city lights looked like soft reflections in a dream. Sarah Collins, 33, stood under the awning of a small bookstore cafe, holding a paper cup of chamomile tea that had already gone lukewarm. She wasn't in a rush to go home. Home was just a quiet apartment filled with books, soft music, and the silence of a life lived alone a little. Too long. She'd been single for a while, not because she didn't want love, but because love after a heartbreak can feel like a door that won't open again. She worked from home as a freelance editor, fixing other people's words but often unsure how to fix her own story. That night, she wasn't looking for anything. She just wanted to feel the comfort of a warm space, maybe read a few pages, maybe just sit and listen to the rain. But sometimes life sends you someone when you've stopped expecting anyone. Inside the cafe, Ethan Walker, 36, sat alone by the large front window with a black coffee and a leather-bound notebook. He had traveled from Portland for a work conference, but truthfully, he wasn't here for business tonight. He just needed a break from hotel walls and long days filled with small talk. Ethan was a quiet man, smart, steady, the kind who noticed things others missed. He had been through a long breakup the year before, one that had left him questioning if real connection was something people just grew out of. His friends told him to get back out there to date again. But how do you start over when your heart doesn't trust easily anymore? Writing helped. It always had. And so on this rainy night in a city that wasn't home, he found comfort in the simple act of being still, of letting his mind wander in a place where nobody knew him. Sarah stepped inside the cafe just as the wind picked up. She was shaking the rain off her coat when her cup slipped out of her hand and spilled, rolling across the floor toward Ethan's table. The hot tea splashed slightly on the corner of his notebook. Embarrassed, she rushed over. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," she said, flustered and apologetic. "It's okay," Ethan replied with a soft smile, already helping her clean it up. Their hands brushed for half a second, and both of them paused. Something about that small touch felt unexpectedly warm. Their eyes really met for the first time. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't love at first sight, but it felt like something shifted. Something unspoken. They shared a quiet laugh about clumsy hands and rainy nights, and for a moment the world outside seemed to fade. Sarah took a seat across the cafe after that, but she kept glancing over at Ethan, and every so often he looked up too. There was a strange comfort in their glances, like they were both remembering something they hadn't known they missed. Two strangers, each carrying their own quiet heartbreaks, drawn together in the warmth of a small cafe while the city washed itself clean in the rain. They didn't speak again that night. No phone numbers, no flirtation. Just that simple, delicate thread of connection that sometimes appears between two people when they least expect it. And as they both walked into the rainy night alone, something had already changed, something they couldn't explain yet, but could feel in the quiet places of their hearts. Sometimes love begins not with fireworks, but with a glance, a spilled cup, and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, your story is about to begin again. The rain was steady and soft, falling like a whisper over the city as Sarah stepped out of the cafe later that night. She hadn't expected to be walking home, but something about the fresh air, even in the cold, helped her think. She was halfway down the block when she heard a voice behind her, calm, familiar, and gentle. "Hey," Ethan called out, jogging up beside her, holding his jacket over his head. "Mind if I walk with you?" She hesitated for half a second, then gave a small smile. "Sure," she said, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. The truth was, she didn't mind at all. Her apartment was only a few blocks away, and normally she would have preferred to walk alone. But tonight, something about him, the way he spoke, The way he didn't rush to fill the silence made her want to share the walk, even if it meant arriving home a little wetter. They didn't talk much at first. Just the sound of their footsteps. And the rain around them, like the world had quieted just for them. Then Ethan spoke. "You from Seattle?" he asked, hands tucked into his coat pockets. "Mostly," Sarah answered. "Moved here for college and never left. I guess I found comfort in the gray skies." He chuckled. "I'm from Portland, close enough to understand. I like the quiet cities. They don't demand too much from you." She nodded. "Yeah, they let you hide a little if you need to." That made him look at her, curious. "You hiding from something?" he asked, not in a teasing way, but with real interest. She thought about it before answering. Not something. Just people, maybe expectations, the noise. He didn't push. He just nodded like he understood Dot as they turned a corner. A breeze swept through and Sarah instinctively pulled her coat tighter. Without thinking, Ethan moved a little closer, just enough that their shoulders nearly brushed. It wasn't bold or flirtatious, it was quiet, respectful, and somehow more intimate than any line he could have said. They stopped for a moment. Beneath an awning where the light from a street lamp fell gently across the sidewalk, Sarah glanced up at him. "What about you?" she asked. "What are you hiding from?" Ethan looked at the ground, then met her eyes. "A version of myself. I thought I had to be. You know, the guy with the perfect life plan, career, marriage, all figured out. But when it fell apart, I realized I didn't know who I really was without all that." His voice was low, honest. There was a crack in it, the kind that comes from living through something that changes you. Sarah's heart softened. She knew that feeling all too well. They kept walking. And somehow, what started as a short walk turned into an hour-long conversation that danced between heartbreak, hope, and the strange comfort of meeting someone who didn't feel like a stranger anymore. They laughed about little things bad. Dates, coffee habits, favorite movies. And beneath it all was a quiet awareness. Something was unfolding here. Something gentle but strong. Not the kind of love that burns fast and bright, but the kind that grows slowly, steadily, like warmth, spreading through your chest. As they reached her building, neither of them seemed ready to say goodbye. Sarah turned to him, her voice soft. "Thanks for walking with me." Ethan looked at her, his eyes kind but searching. "Thank you for letting me." She didn't invite him up. He didn't ask. But as they stood there, close enough to feel the warmth between them, there was a pause that held more than words. Then he said, "Maybe I'll see you tomorrow?" She smiled. "Maybe." And just like that, she stepped inside, heart beating differently than it had just hours before. Sometimes the most unexpected connections happen when two people share a little silence, a little rain, and a little honesty. The next few days passed in a kind of soft golden blur. Ethan stayed in Seattle longer than he originally planned, telling his coworkers he needed a bit more breathing room before diving back into meetings and deadlines. The truth was, he couldn't get Sarah out of his mind, and to his quiet relief, she felt the same. They met again once for coffee, then dinner. Then a slow walk along the pier where the air tasted like salt and the sky turned a dusky purple. With each meeting, their connection deepened not with grand gestures or fast-moving declarations, but in the little moments that stitched them together. The way Sarah laughed when she talked about the terrible first dates she'd had. The way Ethan listened, really listened, like every word mattered. The comfort of silence between them. No awkward pauses. Just space where they both felt safe to be themselves. By the end of the week, they found themselves back at the waterfront late. At night, standing at the same railing where the lights shimmered across the water like 1,000 quiet promises. It was chilly, but neither of them seemed to notice. Sarah leaned slightly over the railing, her hands gripping the cold metal. You ever feel like you're standing right on the edge of something, and you don't know if you should jump or run? She asked, her voice low and thoughtful. Ethan stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel his presence like warmth on her back. All the time, he said. But tonight I don't feel like running. She turned to face him, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Their eyes held each other, searching for something that didn't need to be spoken. Ethan slowly reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind Sarah's ear. His hand lingered on her cheek, his thumb lightly grazing her skin. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't forced. It was a question asked without words. And in her eyes, he saw the answer. Sarah leaned into his touch, her breath catching slightly. Not from nerves, but from the overwhelming feeling of being seen. Not just as someone interesting or attractive, but as someone real. Someone worth knowing, even in her quiet, broken places. They didn't kiss, not yet. But the moment felt more intimate than any kiss could have been. The closeness, the vulnerability, the unspoken pull between them, it filled the space like music. They stood there for a while, saying nothing, letting the sound of the waves and the city hum around them. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. I haven't felt this way in a long time, like someone actually sees me. Ethan looked at her, his expression open, honest. You're not invisible to me, Sarah, you never were. That night didn't end in romance the way some stories do. No dramatic kisses in the rain, no promises of forever, but it changed everything. It was the night two lonely souls found each other not just through attraction, but through understanding. Through shared silence and slow, honest words. Sarah didn't feel like just another passing moment in someone's life. And Ethan didn't feel like he had to keep his heart locked away. There was a softness between them, a kind of mutual respect, that made everything feel safe even as it stirred something deeper inside. That night, everything changed not because they rushed into love, but because they slowed down long enough to feel it blooming quietly, gently. Like something they didn't want to lose. The days that followed moved differently, like time itself had softened around them. Ethan extended his stay without even thinking twice, and Sarah found herself checking her phone more often, smiling every time his name appeared on the screen. It was subtle at first, small texts, shared songs, late-night calls that drifted into quiet pauses filled with warmth. What they were building didn't need labels. It wasn't about rushing or proving anything. It was about trust, presence, and the rare feeling of meeting someone who truly understood your quiet. Their connection didn't burn fast like wildfire. It grew slow like a candle's flame, steady, warm, and real. One evening, Ethan cooked dinner at Sarah's apartment. Something simple: grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, a bottle of red wine. They didn't dress up. They didn't try to impress. But the night felt full, like something sacred was unfolding right there in the ordinary. They laughed as he burned the first batch of vegetables, and she teased him about needing cooking lessons. When he looked at her across the table, hair tied up messily, wine glass in hand, he couldn't help but say it out loud. You look like home. Sarah blinked, her smile slowly softening, and in her eyes, Ethan saw a flicker of something deep: hope, maybe. Or maybe it was the feeling of a woman realizing someone saw her not just as a passing moment, but as someone to stay for. Later, they sat on the couch, their legs tangled like they'd done this for years. No TV, just quiet music playing in the background and the soft rhythm of their breathing falling in sync. Sarah rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, her fingers gently tracing the curve of his hand. He kissed the top of her head, and it wasn't just affection, it was comfort, it was promise. No grand speeches, no dramatic gestures, just the kind of intimacy that made her chest ache in the best way. Still deep down, both of them felt the weight of what came next. Ethan had a life in Portland. Sarah had hers in Seattle. Their connection was real, but so were their routines, their responsibilities. That night, as the music played low and the rain tapped against the windows, Ethan spoke softly. "What happens when I have to go back?" Sarah sat up slightly, her face thoughtful, not afraid but honest. "I don't know," she whispered. "But I don't want this to be just a beautiful memory. I want to see where it goes, even if it's not easy." He nodded, pulling her close. "Me too. I didn't come here looking for anything, Sarah, but now that I've found you, I don't want to lose this." There was no promise of forever, not yet. But there was something even more valuable: mutual choice. Two people willing to try. Willing to fight for something that felt rare and quietly beautiful. As the night stretched on, they sat there, wrapped in each other, not needing anything more than the moment. It wasn't perfect. There were still questions and fears and distance to figure out. But what mattered most was already there: a deep, grown-up kind of love. The kind built not on fairy tales, but on late-night honesty, unexpected laughter, and the simple, life-changing truth that sometimes the right person shows up when you stop searching and simply start feeling. They started off as strangers, but that night and every moment after turned their story into something more, something real, something worth holding on to. And for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt alone.